The Helper Hut is a brand new building which introduces a better version of the Builder Apprentice to help us with upgrades in the lab. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the logistics of the new building, the Helper Hut, and the new helper itself, the Lab Assistant, so you guys can determine whether or not it's worth it. We are going to be covering the price, how it works, how it compares to other gem investments, as well as how good it is compared to the Apprentice Builder. And don't worry, before we start, it's not going to cost you any gems to actually buy this building. Instead, you can buy this building from the shop when you hit Town Hall 9 for 1 million elixir, and it's going to be home to both the Apprentice Builder and the Lab Assistant. And speaking of the Lab Assistant, let's go ahead and break down some more details for him so we can then analyze him a little bit more in depth. First of all, who is this Lab Assistant that we keep referring to? The Lab Assistant is similar to the Apprentice Builder in terms of how he works. He will work for 1 hour a day for a constant rate of time, and every time you upgrade him to the max level, which is level 12, he can work up to 12 times faster for that 1 hour. Now, to really analyze him, we need to look at how the Lab Assistant will actually scale as we upgrade him. And what we find out is that similar to the Apprentice Builder, every time you upgrade the Lab Assistant, it costs more gems to get virtually the same benefit, which effectively means you're going to be paying more and more for the same amount of value. So let's take a look at this chart that I made so you guys can see all the logistics. As you guys can see, the Lab Assistant will unlock at Town Hall 9, and it won't cost any gems to get that first level of the Lab Assistant. On the right hand side, you can see that he saves just over an hour of upgrading for every level that he gets. This means that he actually gets a little bit more value than we initially think he does based on his mechanics, and it gets a little complicated with this. I think it's because of the speed up of it, but these are official numbers from Supercell, so they're accurate. Now, similar to the Apprentice Builder, we can see that you have to be a certain Town Hall level in order to be able to unlock those extra levels for the Lab Assistant. And in terms of price, we see that 3 levels cost 500 gems, 4 levels cost 750 gems, and then the last 4 levels cost 1000 gems each. Now, I don't want this to scare you away from investing into the Lab Assistant because we still haven't analyzed how good he is compared to the other methods that you can use to invest your gems into your progression. So let's take a look at those gem methods that we're going to be comparing against right now. The first method we will compare against is gemming upgrades just straight by itself. I personally think this is the least effective way probably in the game to spend your gems, but we're just going to use this as a starting point so we can start our comparison for the Lab Assistant. I'm also going to slowly reveal this table right here, which is going to show you the standardized amount of days that we skip for every 500 gems we spend using these different methods. This will help us analyze things a lot easier in the future. Just trust the process for now. Now, I actually found out that the gems you need to actually complete an upgrade depends on the amount of time that you have left on that upgrade. The more time you have left, the better ratio you'll get for the amount of gems you'll have to pay. Now, using this calculator, I was able to determine that for the longest upgrade time currently in the game, which is 16 days, you will actually have to spend 5.5 gems per hour. This links back to the table, and then if we do the math, we can see that with about 500 gems, you can skip 3.8 days by straight gemming. Next on our analysis on ways to spend gems, I actually went ahead and looked at glowy ores. Now, I didn't include glowy ores from the wars because that would make things way too complicated and too difficult to calculate, so these are from leagues alone. With Crystal 2, which is a middle of the pack league, you actually end up getting about 20 glowy ores per day from your star bonus. However, at Titan 1, this star bonus goes all the way up to 50 glowy ores per day. Now, if we take a look at the shop offers that we get for glowy ores and then we standardize this to 500 gems, we can see that if you were actually in Crystal 2, it would save you about 10 days of glowy ore farming simply by buying it from the shop. However, in Titan 1, you'd have 50 glowy ores a day, so it would only save you about 4 days of ore farming, so it wouldn't be that significant. Again, this highlights how important it is for you guys to actually be able to get to those higher leagues so you can get more ores every single day. Moving on, we can analyze starry ores that you gain from the lowest town hall that can get starry, which is Town Hall 10, to the highest, which is Town Hall 16 before this update. At Town Hall 10, with a 50% win rate, you will actually average about 4.5 star starry ores per war. However, at Town Hall 16 with a 50% win rate, you will actually average about 9 starry ores per war. Now, if we standardize that and we looked at how many days we would actually skip by spending 500 gems, we would see that Town Hall 10s would skip 12.1 days of starry ore farming, while Town Hall 16 would only be skipping about 6.1 days of starry ore farming. Moving on, we have the books, and the first thing we have is the Book of Heroes. A Book of Heroes can nowadays save you a maximum of 8 days for any upgrade, and it costs 500 gems to get. With the Book of Fighting, on the other hand, you can actually save about 16 days and it costs 925 gems to get. If we use them on 16-day upgrades, we're actually saving around 8.65 days at the 500 gem mark, so that is our threshold for our standard that we're using to compare. And finally, on this table, we have the Goblin Builder and the Goblin Researcher, which are both going to cost 40 gems per day. If we do the math, we're saving 12.5 days worth of upgrades with every 500 gems that we spend. So these are all the rates on the amount of days you can save if you spent 500 gems in any of these methods, and this is going to help us compare to the new Lab Assistant and see where that Lab Assistant breaks even. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how long it takes for the Lab Assistant to break even with each of these methods of gem investment, depending on what level the Lab Assistant is. To help us, I created this table, which you guys can see on screen. It breaks down the break-even point for each level of the Lab Assistant versus all the gem spending methods that we just went over, and all the numbers in this chart are in terms of days. Now, there's a lot to go over in that chart, and I'm not gonna make you stare at it all the time, so I took the best 3 rates out of this chart, and then I compared it to the Lab Assistant just to make things a little bit simpler. Now, as you guys can see, the lowest level of the Lab Assistant is going to break even with the Goblin Builder, which has the best rate, that's literally here, in only 143 days. However, the highest level would break even at a whopping 407 days. Now, why is this? Now, remember that it progressively takes more and more gems for you to actually level up the Lab Assistant, meaning you'll get diminishing returns and that it'll take you longer to pay off the investment that you made. Now, with the books, we can see that the lowest level actually gets paid off around 3 months of activation. This goes up to 282 days at the maximum level, which isn't that bad and is actually better than it is for the Apprentice Builder. But with all these really long numbers, at this point you guys are probably thinking that there's no way that this crazy gem investment is actually going to be worth it. However, here's the cold hard truth. No matter how you look at it, the Lab Assistant is a very good investment. It is simply going to catch up with time, and then once it does catch up, it is a permanent upgrade that you can literally use at any time. And eventually, after you surpass the break-even point, you guys are going to get crazy value from this thing because you'll just be profiting after that. Since the upside is exponential, the Lab Assistant is a must-have investment as well as the Apprentice Builder. But speaking of the Apprentice Builder, let's go ahead and analyze which one is better between the Lab Assistant and the Apprentice Builder. With regards to the Lab in Clash of Clans, we know that the Lab is always going to be longer than the Builder time, so it becomes the main bottleneck that holds players back from maxing. The Apprentice Builder is super useful, but it only speeds up one of the builders for literally 1 hour, and this means that you're not getting that big of an effect. However, there's only one lab, and one lab upgrade can go on at a time, so the Lab Assistant literally is going to speed up your progression by a lot since you can only do one upgrade at a time. Because of this, I would actually give the go-ahead and prioritize the Lab Assistant over the Apprentice Builder. And if you get the Lab Assistant all the way up to level 12, this means that your lab will forever be working at over 150%, which means that eventually you're going to reduce your total time to max by literally 33%. But obviously, going back to scaling, we really need to think about how we want to invest really smart. At the higher levels for each helper, because we spend more and get less return, we actually want to be really smart and focus between the two of them so that we can spend the least amount of gems but get the most amount of hours skipped. My advice is to upgrade both of them evenly, but do the Lab Assistant levels first. That way you can get those extra lab levels out of the way. To help you guys understand my point, I actually made this chart right here, which shows you the exact levels and the exact order that you should upgrade both your Builder's Apprentice and Lab Assistant in to get the most out of the least investment. This is the #1 chart for players right now. If you're trying to progress faster, screenshot this chart, use this chart, because this is the thing that'll allow you to get the best value out of both the Lab Assistant and and the Builder's Apprentice. And one more thing to add, which you guys must hear, is that you can actually queue upgrades for the Builder's Apprentice and the Lab Assistant now. This is huge because previously you had to log on every single day just to make sure that your Builder's Apprentice was getting the most value possible. If you didn't log on, he simply just wouldn't be assigned to an upgrade, you'd be wasting your gems and your time, but this is no longer an issue. This change is great in my opinion because it allows helpers to be super efficient without having to be taxing on the players who have really long upgrades. Furthermore, it just immortalizes what I've been emphasizing in this video. After you buy all 5 builders, the Builder's Apprentice and the Lab Assistant are the best ways to spend your gems in Clash of Clans, hands down. And the Helper's Hut will be a sight of joy for players for years to come. And because it's a new building, who knows, maybe sometime in the future we will also get new helpers as well. It's something I would love to see, and it's something I really hope they consider. But I've got some bad news. Even if you have a max level Apprentice Builder or a max level Lab Assistant, it's not going to do you any good if you don't know about the brand new time reductions that we got and the ways that you can maximize those to progress your account faster. That's why you need to watch this video right here, where I literally went in depth with every single time reduction and cost reduction that we had to let you know how you can maximize those things and progress your account a lot faster.